What would you say if a cop suddenly shined a UV light into your car and reached for your door handle? If you say the wrong thing, you can give away your rights in seconds. And once that search starts, pulling it back gets a whole lot harder. Before I reveal the exact words, hit subscribe right now so you can find this video again when a real traffic stop happens. Smash like too, because what you're about to hear could save you from a search, a charge, or a very long night. Here's the reality. A UV light looks scary because it feels high-tech, secret, and final. Like the officer already knows something you don't. But a light is not magic. A light does not erase your rights. What matters is what you say before that officer opens your door, reaches into your car, or turns a basic stop into a fishing trip. In this video, you're going to learn the one line that blocks easy consent, the question that exposes whether you're being held or just stalled, the mistake that makes officers think you've agreed, and the calm response that keeps you from talking yourself into trouble. I've analyzed over 200 body cam videos. The same pattern shows up again and again. Drivers panic, talk too much, and accidentally help build the case against themselves. Let me show you exactly how smart drivers keep control without arguing, without being rude, and without doing anything illegal. Now let's talk about why this moment matters so much. Most people see a traffic stop like a short delay. License, registration, maybe a warning, then you leave. But cops are trained to watch your words, your hands, your face, and your tone. If they think you're scared, confused, or eager to please, they push harder. That's when the casual questions start. Mind if I take a quick look? You don't have anything illegal in here, right? Why are you so nervous? Then comes the light. Maybe a flashlight. Maybe a UV light. Maybe a dog later. Most people have no idea that the biggest danger is not the light itself. It's the moment you start explaining, apologizing, joking, or saying yes to sound cooperative. Here's the trick they don't want you knowing. You can be respectful, comply with lawful orders, and still refuse consent, clearly. That one difference changes everything. The first thing you need to do is separate a request from a command. This is where most drivers lose before the search even starts. An officer leans in and says, "Can I open this? Mind if I take a look? Or let me just check something real quick." That sounds like a command when you're stressed, but sometimes it's really a request for your permission. And if you say, "Sure, okay, I guess," or "do what you need to do," you may have just made the search legal through consent. Here's exactly what you say. "Officer, are you asking for my consent, or are you giving me a lawful order?" Word for word, memorize that line. That sentence is powerful because it forces the moment into the open. It makes the officer choose. If it's just a request, now you know you can say no. If it's a lawful order, you do not argue on the roadside. You comply physically, but you still do not give consent. Defense attorneys use this exact line in court because it helps show what really happened. Were you freely agreeing, or were you just obeying authority because you felt you had no choice? Bad way. Most drivers say, okay, I guess that's fine. Then the officer searches and later says, "You consented." Good way. Smart drivers say, "Officer, are you asking for my consent, or are you giving me a lawful order?" Then the record becomes much clearer. This is 100% legal. You're allowed to ask if something is a request or an order. You are not resisting. You are not escalating. You are protecting yourself from fake choice language. Former police officers have confirmed this works because it slows the stop down and removes confusion. It also makes body cam footage a lot more useful later. There's a court case behind this idea too. In Bumper v. North Carolina, the Supreme Court said, consent is not real consent when it comes from pressure or claim of authority. In simple English, if police make it sound like you have no choice, the law gets suspicious about whether you really agreed. That matters for you because traffic stops are full of gray language. You feel pressure. The officer has the badge, the lights, and the power. Your job is to make the situation clear. Watch what happens when you do this right. The officer says, "Mind if I check the car?" You stay calm and say the line. Now the officer either backs off, asks again more directly, or gives a real order. If it was only fishing, the moment gets weaker. If it was a real order, you've protected the record without fighting. That can matter later if a judge needs to decide whether your rights were respected. If you skip this step, you can walk straight into the worst kind of search case. Not because police found a warrant, not because they had strong evidence, because you handed them consent by accident. Listen closely because this is critical. Never argue about power on the roadside. Just make them say what power they think they have. Have you ever heard an officer phrase something like, "It was a command when it was really a request"? Drop a comment below because once you notice this trick, you'll hear it everywhere. Now let's get to the line in your title. If that officer is about to enter your car, your strongest sentence is simple, short, and impossible to misunderstand. Here's exactly what you say. "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Those exact 8 words. Say them clearly, say them once. If needed, say them again the same way. This line matters because consent is the shortcut. Police love consent because it saves time, avoids paperwork, and kills a lot of later challenges. If you give general consent, courts often treat that as broad permission. That can include bags, containers, and places inside the car you never meant to allow. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection because it shuts down the easiest path into your vehicle. Bad way. Most drivers say, I don't have anything to hide. Then the officer hears that as a green light and starts searching. Good way. Smart drivers say, Officer, I do not consent to any searches. Then the officer has to rely on some legal reason other than your permission. Let me show you exactly why this works. In Florida versus Jimeno, the Supreme Court said that when a driver gives consent to search a car, that consent can stretch farther than people think. In plain English, if you say yes to a search, police may be able to open containers that could hold what they say they're looking for. That is why your first job is not to limit a bad consent. Your first job is to avoid giving it at all. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings. If you say yes once, even casually, your case gets much harder later. If you say no clearly, now the officer needs another legal reason. Maybe they claim they see something in plain view. Maybe they say they smell something. Maybe they say they fear a weapon. But the big point is this: you did not hand them the key. Now let's connect this to the UV light. Courts have long said that when an officer is lawfully standing outside your car, using a light to help see what is already visible usually does not count as a search by itself. Think of Texas versus Brown. That case involved a flashlight, not a UV light, but the idea is similar. A light from outside may help them observe. It does not automatically let them climb inside. The real fight starts when observation turns into entry, touching, opening, or dragging the stop out longer than needed. Watch what happens when a driver says the line the right way. The officer leans toward the handle. You stay calm. You don't yank the door. You don't lecture. You say, Officer, I do not consent to any searches. Now, if the officer keeps going, the body cam and dash cam tell a different story. You were not volunteering. You were objecting clearly. And if the officer says, if you've got nothing to hide, why not let me search? Do not take the bait. That line is made to make you feel guilty for having rights. You don't need a speech. You don't need to explain your privacy. You just repeat the line. Polite, flat, calm. Here's the reality. Innocent people get talked into terrible searches every day because they think cooperation means surrender. It doesn't. You can be respectful and still protect your car. The next move is about time. A lot of stops become searches because the officer keeps you there longer and longer until something turns up. Maybe a dog arrives. Maybe backup shows up. Maybe more questions start. That's why your next line is so important, especially after the ticket work looks done. You look at the officer and say this: Am I being detained or am I free to leave? Those exact 10 words. This question matters because a traffic stop has a mission. Check your license, check registration, handle the traffic issue. That's it. Police can ask extra questions, but they usually cannot stretch the stop longer just to go hunting unless they have specific facts that suggest crime. Not a vibe, not a guess. Real facts. Bad way. Most drivers say, sure, I can wait, or no problem, take your time. Then the stop drags on and more tools show up. Good way. Smart drivers say, am I being detained or am I free to leave? Then the officer has to face the clock. This is 100% legal. You are allowed to ask if you're free to go. And no, this does not mean you should say it every 10 seconds like a robot. Timing matters. You use it when the traffic reason seems finished, or when the officer starts drifting into extra investigation. Maybe your documents are back in your hand. Maybe the warning is done. Maybe the officer is lingering and fishing. That is your moment. Rodriguez versus United States is the case you need to know here. The Supreme Court said police cannot stretch a normal traffic stop beyond the time needed for the traffic mission just to run a dog or some unrelated investigation, unless they have separate reasonable suspicion. In plain English, once the traffic business should be over, they do not get bonus time to poke around. Defense attorneys use this exact line in court because it helps show whether the stop had already turned into something bigger without legal cause. If the officer says you're not free to leave, that matters. If the officer cannot explain why you're still there, that matters too. If the officer says, hold on while we wait for another unit, that timing matters a lot. Let me show you exactly how this plays out. The officer returns your documents. Instead of walking away, he asks where you're coming from, where you're going, and whether there's anything illegal. That is the danger zone. You don't need to fight. You ask the question, am I being detained or am I free to leave? Now the officer has to either end it, explain the legal reason, or make a move that can later be reviewed. If you never ask, you may stand there in that weird, fake, friendly limbo while the stop grows legs. And once time passes, police often build the story backward based on your delayed response. Your clear question helps stop that drift. 90% of drivers don't know what's coming next. Stay with me because this part can save you even if the officer makes you step out of the car. If the officer tells you to get out, you probably have to get out. Pennsylvania vs. Mimms says this is allowed. Here's exactly what you say as you comply. I will comply with your order, but I do not consent to any search of my car. That line is gold because it shows you are obeying the order while keeping your refusal crystal clear. Bad way, most drivers say, fine, do whatever you want. This surrenders your rights immediately. Good way, smart drivers say, I will comply with your order, but I do not consent to any search of my car. Keep your hands visible, move slow, do not reach back into the car unless told. Do not slam the door, do not make speeches. Just step out and repeat your line if needed. Michigan v. Long says they may do a limited safety sweep, but that is not a full evidence hunt. Knowles v. Iowa says police do not get to do a full car search just because they wrote a citation. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection when the officer tries to turn a basic stop into something bigger. Watch what happens when you use this line well. You step out because you must, but you do not hand over consent. Now, let's put the whole legal picture together in plain English. First, Texas versus Brown and the light issue. Second, Rodriguez v. United States and the timing of the traffic stop. Third, Arizona versus Gant and Knowles versus Iowa. Fourth, bumper vicks, North Carolina and Florida versus Jimeno regarding fake pressure and broad consent. Now picture this. You're driving home at night. Lights flash behind you. You pull over safely. The officer comes up and says, you rolled through a stop sign. You hand over your documents. So far, normal. Then the officer starts asking odd questions and shines a UV light across your seats and floorboards. The wrong way is to laugh nervously and say you have nothing to hide. That becomes his shortcut. The right way is to stay calm and ask if it is a request or a lawful order. If he orders you out, you comply, but clarify that you do not consent to any search. That does not mean you win every time on the roadside. It means you stop helping the search. Next week, I'm revealing what to say when cops claim they smell weed. Subscribe right now so you don't miss it. So let's lock this in. First, ask whether a request is a command. Second, refuse consent clearly. Third, ask if you are being detained. Fourth, comply with exit orders while repeating your refusal. Hit subscribe so you catch that smell search video next week. Smash, like if this script gave you words you can use. And drop a comment telling me which line you're memorizing first. Stay safe out there.